Hey, thanks for stopping by Minnesota Black Robe Regiment. Make sure you're checking out the bell icon down there so that you get notifications and that you are subscribed. Like, comment, and share. Today is Father's Day of 2021. It is June 20th, and it is Sunday. And like I do on most of my Sunday videos, I want to talk about things from from a explicitly Christian perspective. And because I did a video about some um, important female mother figures from the days of the American War for Independence and the days leading up to it, I want to do a video today talking to dads. But I'm going to do it by talking about myself, not because I'm a great father figure for others to emulate, but because I have a heavenly Father who has said some things to us as dads that are worth noting, and I want this especially to be motivational to you, my especially my fellow Christian men and other dads out there who maybe are struggling as dads, because if you're a dad, I can almost guarantee you're struggling. If you're not struggling, you're just not working very very hard at being a father. So this first verse that I want to share is from Proverbs 23:24, and it says, "The father of a righteous child has great joy. A man who fathers a wise son rejoices in him." It's so important for us to understand this as dads, that our goal in molding and shaping our children is not to turn them into little automatons of us, not to turn them into these images of what we think they should be. Now, do we have a reasonable expectation, if you will, that if we're leading well and raising our children well, that they are going to emulate us? I think so, yeah. But in raising my children, for all of the mistakes I made, and trust me, I made a lot of mistakes, and I sinned in so many ways in how I raised my children. I want them to be wise. I want them to be righteous. And if my son, who is now a man, is can be wise and demonstrate wisdom, uh, I'll be content in that. I did a video a while ago talking about, people saying, "Well, why do you do the things you do? Why is all this stuff about tyranny and everything so important to you?" Because I crave justice. True justice, not justice with a modifier, but justice. I crave justice. I desire justice. I long for justice. And I want to instill that in my children. And I believe for the most part I have. I see it in them. And even though they say things that I disagree with from time to time, and they say things that I'm not 100% on board with, and they don't share my views 100% across the board, they're still wise. My son is wise. My daughter is wise. And she's doing a great job in raising my very young grandchild already. The second verse is from Psalm 127. It's verses 3-5, and it says, "Children are a heritage from the Lord, offspring a reward from him. Like arrows in the hands of a warrior are children born in one's youth. Blessed is the man whose quiver is full of them. They will not be put to shame when they contend with their opponents in court." I joke often that my quiver was very small. I only had 2 children, but they are wonderful, and I am blessed. And they aren't contending with people in court, with their opponents in court. That's something that's probably more likely to happen to me. But God blessed me with the children that He blessed me with. And that is part and parcel of why I fight so hard against injustice, against the tyranny that I see taking place here in our Grand Republic. And it's because of that blessing. It is because of those arrows, if you will, that God has given me to loose out into the world. And the fact that now my daughter in turn is having children of her own, that I will continue to fight and instill that desire in them for justice. Even now, when they're adults and on their own, I want my children to have a desire for justice and crave that and long for it, because that'll be a blessing to them as their children grow and mature and fight as well. The last verse I want to share and I want to talk about is from Deuteronomy 6, verses 6 and 7. And it says, "These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up." Friends, fellow dads, fellow Christian men with children of your own, this is predominantly, of course, talking about fathers impressing the moral law of God onto their children and in a way where they honor it and cherish it. But there's a principle here for how we can teach our kids about the things that we cling to and that we hold so dear. So many of our founding fathers, Christian men, had made comments to the effect, and I'm going to kind of lump them all together and paraphrase, that you have to have moral people to have the republic that the United States is, and for it to be successful and for it to remain a place of liberty and freedom. And I plead with you, besides fighting for liberty, besides fighting for the freedoms that the United States is known for, please impress on your children the reality of the moral law of God. You cannot go wrong. You cannot go wrong if you're teaching your children to not be adulterers. You cannot go wrong if you're teaching your children to not be thieves. You cannot go wrong if you're teaching your children to not murder their neighbors. And in not murdering their neighbors, like also instilling in them not to have hatred for their neighbors and to not covet what belongs to their neighbors. See, that's why we are where we are in our country today. This place where we are, where we have people who are hating one another for the pigment of their skin, and who are propagating this lie that it's okay to hate a certain segment of our culture, a certain segment of our society, a certain segment of our republic because they're white or because they're cisgendered heterosexual men. That comes from a place of murder, because it comes from a place of hatred in the heart. It comes from a place of coveting. I often tell people that God's eternal moral law, the 10 Commandments, are bookended by 2 things. There's honor God above all else, worship nothing else, and do not covet. And in between these 2 commands of honoring God above everything else and not coveting what is not yours, lies all the other sin. When people fail to honor God over here, they begin to covet that which is not theirs. And they see what is not theirs as their right to take and have. And so then they steal. They build the desire to take away from someone else something that rightly is theirs and take it to themselves. And when that person resists that, then they develop hatred in their heart for that person. And then as they're developing that hatred in their heart for that person, the desire and the willingness to take from that person by force, even up to death if necessary, comes into play. And so then they begin to fester with that hatred, and that putrescence comes in, and then they're willing to do harm to another person, up to killing them, murdering them, to have what is theirs. Don't you see that? How can you not see that today? The reason our country is in such a horrible state when it comes to ethnic relations is because there's been a group of people telling oppressed groups it's okay to hate who you view as your oppressor because they've taken from you what is rightfully yours. So now you can hate them and take back from them, and you can despise them. I recently had a conversation with a woman that I greatly respect, and what she and I were talking about was part of her walk away from the cult of social justice. And that one of the things that she observed was people that she thought were on her side were willing to do great bodily harm to people that they hated. And she said, but we're supposed to be the people of love and tolerance. See, when you allow coveting what is not rightfully yours to well up within you, you're then willing to despise those who have what you want. And then you're willing to dehumanize them, to look at them as less than image bearers, the imago Dei that they are. And then when you can lessen them in that way, or take away from them, or strip away from them the imago Dei, you can justify any action you take against them. I'm pleading with you, my fellow conservatives, my fellow constitutionalists, my fellow individualists, my fellow volunteerists, my fellow American patriots. Don't look at the people who are bringing a hostile ideological position into our country and into our culture and into our society. Don't see them as enemies worthy of being hated, because then you will be willing to do harm to them. What you need to do is you need to look at them and say, I hate your ideology, but I love you, and I want to rescue you from where you are. Let's have a conversation. Don't sink to their covetry or their covetousness. Don't sink to their idolatry. Don't sink to their murderous hearts. Don't sink to that level. Instill in your children compassion. Instill in your children a desire to love those who hate them, to bless those who curse them, and to be a moral people. That is what it means to be a father, and a patriotic father. And for Christians especially, point those that you love to the Heavenly Father, and to his selfless sacrifice of his only begotten Son upon the cross. So that in doing that, you are reminded of the sacrifice that was of such great importance, that you remember it was done for you in your worthless estate. And that should cause pity to fall on those who oppose us and reject us for the stands we take. If you can't do that, then examine yourselves. If you can't instill that in your children, then examine yourselves. If what you're instilling in your children is a hatred for those that hold differing ideological views, then you're no better than those whose ideology you hate. You're just like them. And you're not a truly constitutionally minded, republic-loving patriot. You're just a rightist. So on this Father's Day, fathers, hear these words. Be challenged, be convicted, be motivated, and be moved. And remember that the stands that you take should not just be, oh, well, we're right and they're wrong. It should be to foster a nation of liberty and freedom and the pursuit of happiness that comes through a self-governing people who are moral and therefore capable of self-governance. And then remember this verse, Deuteronomy 6:6-7. The commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts, and press them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home, and when you walk along the road, and when you lie down, and when you get up. And then this from Ephesians 6. In all that's happening today, my fellow fathers, especially my fellow Christian men, fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and the instruction of the Lord. Until next time, Soli Deo Gloria.